Okay, let's briefly talk about Alexander. Um, I, yeah, I'm sure I messed with your focus there. Well, it's hard to tell what came with what here, and it gets more complicated when you close the door. My wife probably was more quiet than I'm moving her. It's hard to tell what came with what here. I can piece it all together, but that may not be terribly valuable to you because this is back in the second edition, the first deluxe edition of Great Battles of Alexander. And yes, I have. Before I got this, I went and picked up this thing. Don't get this. It doesn't have very many battles. It has about 4 battles in it, and it's really kind of hideous. The appearance is very bad 80s look to it. They definitely upgraded the graphical quality. For the first deluxe edition, the second deluxe edition comes with even more battles, and at least one of the modules is partially folded in. Some of the C3I stuff I think got folded into it. So you probably have close to the amount of stuff that I have if you get the deluxe edition that's modern. And I was unwilling to wait and see, hey, would they publish it? Component-wise, the deluxe edition is much nicer. It's hard to tell here, but these are these really kind of silky counters. Very, very double thickness. Very impressive. Prettier coloring to them. Just really, really awesome stuff. There were some component issues with that deluxe edition. But it being GMT, of course, they went out of their way to try to help get people what they need. Now, these are, I'm trying to remember, I think Diadachi and Phalanx were both modules for the new deluxe edition as well as the original. I think some of Tyrant may be folded in. I kind of did a short review at the end of my Tyrant games. That module did not impress me too much. I haven't looked at Diadachi or Phalanx yet, but I'm under the need to get cleaned out of here, so I have to pack up my games. Alexander itself impressed me a little bit more than the Syracuse one did. Too many of the battles in Syracuse were the same. Alexander, you have a little bit more diversity there. You got more toys. You got the elephants, the chariots. I think you had some elephants maybe in Syracuse. I don't remember. If there were, they weren't a major factor in the game. And you will definitely see them when we get to the successor battles. Which, let's see what we got here. Phalanx is successors too, and Diadachi, of course, is going to be successors. Much. No, I'm not so sure. Let's see. Yeah, so Diadachi is going to get you in the early successor battles. Phalanx should get you to a much later time when the system's been significantly refined, the military systems. So it'll be more interesting to me to see what the Phalanx does than any of these others. And one of the neat things with this, as opposed to Syracuse, is that the big Phalanx units are powerful enough that they kind of make sense. they're able to throw their weight around in a way that those hoplites just couldn't handle, the barbarian units when they were facing them. They couldn't handle the smaller, more maneuverable units. The phalanxes still have trouble with that, and that's where the Persian player or the Indian player or whatever, whoever's facing Alexander, can kind of come into their own is by using maneuverability. On the other hand, you're facing Alexander, who's just amazing, and will pretty much kick your ass based on his high command value alone. Now, you saw that I wasn't able to make use of that always. Sometimes I get a little unlucky, sometimes something else happens, and I end up in a situation where I just can't, I can't figure out, either there or in Syracuse, how to best use those units and protect them and keep them from being swarmed by the little units and run around the flanks and to the rear even, especially if there's cav involved. So that's sort of your defining problem as Alexander. You have to protect those phalanxes. They're very potent and they have a lot of staying power when you hit them, and so do the hoplites for that matter, at least if they have good quality. The thing with the phalanxes is they're all very high quality, and they have some additional advantages. But even so, you really, if you're getting slammed in the rear regularly, you're going to fall apart, and that's what caused the losses that I saw. Now, Alexander historically didn't lose any of these battles, so you could say, wow, the historical value is questionable. Yeah, well, the historical value of all of these series, the GBOH stuff, is questionable. But then again, so is my tactical capability. So, maybe I'm not seeing something important about how do you protect these units. And the system has become refined. The skirmishers were a real flaw in the system before. I think the new deluxe edition has some rules that work a little better and probably have been extended over to the SPQR side as well. Let me think what else. I can't really think of too much else to say, except that, there was sort of this initial excitement for me. Samurai especially was the first one that I played, and I was like, oh, this is just so awesome, the tactical matrix and all that. I can't really compare this to that game, because I think Samurai had a lot of chrome on it. One thing I can say is all of these, and I don't think the new rulebook has improved on it, have a disorganization to the rules that feels that makes them very difficult to approach. I'm not sure that you could apply a very strong organization to them, but quite often you're flipping through looking for that little special factor that applies to something. Indian slippage rule was one of them, but that was something specific. It's just noted in the charts, and it's like, what the fuck is this? Well, it's for one scenario, but there's another scenario where it seems like it would apply, and it doesn't. But yeah, the Samurai excited me so much because it was the first one I looked at. SPQR, I think, is probably the strongest in the series, but it's hard to tell because I looked at that with all the modules jumbled in, and it makes sense that it would be the most diverse and most interesting in a lot of ways, because it gives you this, it gives you a much broader time span than most of the others do. Obviously, Chariots of Fire gives you a humongous time span, but Alexander, the core game is Alexander's lifespan, which isn't all that long, and there's not that much difference to his forces. What he faces is slightly different. Certainly, the early fight against the Greeks is particularly different from what he's going to see against the Persians. The Indian army is not all that different from the Persians. It's, less reliant on the cavalry, more reliant on elephants, and it's got those awesome archers. If they're able to come to bear as such awesome archers, but in the big battle, they're not because the ground's too muddy. So they become really kind of random and likely not to be too effective at all. Trying to think compared to anything else. But I haven't done too many in this series, so this one's a solid entry. I feel like the greater time span, the greater types of units in the SPQR, you're facing the Celtic barbarians, you're facing the Carthaginian armies, which are very much are similar to Alexander's armies. You've got some weird stuff going on, like the Raphia battle, or there was another one with a lot of chariots in it. That was just kind of odd. Something that probably belonged more in Diadochi than anywhere else. And I think it's actually redone in there. Raphia maybe as well. But it was just kind of we didn't know where to fit things at that point, but now we've decided, okay, we can handle them in this series instead because we're going to have a game on it specifically. Not much else. It's an enjoyable system, and I like playing it, but again, a lot of times I kind of wander away scratching my head saying, you can't quite do what you think you were supposed to do. So, for example, Gaugamela, the big battle with the Persians. I don't think you could take Alexander's actual strategy and make it work. There's nothing special about him that allows that countermarch to make any sense at all. Although the battle may set up with that already having taken place. But you're not getting that sort of the tension of what the fuck is he doing or anything like that, because everything's in the open. So, Alexander's pretty potent, but he doesn't imbue the player with such brilliance that the player can, foresee what the enemy's reaction is going to be, which Alexander seems very capable of doing. An even bigger gripe is, a much bigger gripe, is that the game really disincentivizes you from throwing Alexander into hand-to-hand combat. Now, he almost always did, He was badly wounded. His army would have probably not followed him if he wasn't throwing himself into the battle and into the fore. So, even a small penalty or something, if he's not fighting, probably wouldn't make up for having him fight, because having him fight disables all his command abilities, basically. All that brilliance, all that capability, it all just goes away. And then, of course, there's the chance he just dies, which is terrible, You can't have that. That would pretty much wreck, if you were playing a campaign or something. Well, he's going to lose some of these battles. Some of them are close enough that unless the Alexander player is significantly better than his opponents, he's going to fail in some of these. Which is probably a good thing, in terms of having a competitive game. Alexander is, basically a god of war, and just is able to pull things off that the player probably will not be able to. So these battles are also going to likely be closer run things than they were historically as well. And again, that's, for good or ill, that's what you get out of this. It's not, it's not quite the same as even the Punic Wars with Hannibal, where maybe Hannibal's a genius in some battles, but he got fought to draws at times. So, he didn't have the kind of record and the kind of just awesomeness that Alexander essentially had during this period. You also have the tactical systems. You have the feeling that maybe the phalanx isn't as strong as it should be against the things that it's facing. It's hard to tell. It really is. Is it Alexander's genius alone? It's clearly there's significant genius there and significant charismatic bonus, which goes into the values of the units, etc. But is it that, or is the phalanx just so kick-ass, which it doesn't seem in this game, that it would be really, really hard to undermine them? And again, I'm not enough of a student of the era to really be able to definitively say, yeah, the phalanx was that good. But you could certainly look at it in either direction. It's a tougher game to design, though, if the core tools that Alexander has are so much better than the opponents. And they don't feel like they are. It feels like the main advantage you're going with Alexander is his ability to command lots of troops, rally his troops, and do lots of things, trumping in stuff like that. His elite initiative bonus, etc. As opposed to, the very difficult to represent, which is just his being able to get sort of the, tactical surprise on the enemy in so many ways, and the edge there. Instead, it's more he's just got a better command, sort of a turn radius of command. There's a better term for it, but I don't remember it because there's fucking buzzing going on under me all the time. Yeah. It'd be good to be out of here if I don't destroy all my games and moving them. Anyway, this one seems like a pretty decent one. I'm not as thrilled with it as I have been with any of the others, with the exception of Hoplite, however. Hoplite was just way too stilted for me, and the battles were too similar. Just grind up against each other. Alright, send it up.